Merakey in Motion. This is the first in our series of talks about Merakey's strategic plan, what we've gotten done, where we're going, and how we're getting there. And so I'm really excited. This is our premiere episode. We are talking with leaders, we're talking with employees, we're talking with strategic champions about what's happening at Merakey and how we are driving toward the future with our strategic plan. So in our first episode, I'm really excited. We've got Joe Martz here, our CEO, to talk about our strategy. This is going to be an exciting conversation, talking about what we've done. Really exciting to hear about you, Joe, hear about what your thoughts are on strategy. So I want to dive in. I want to talk a little bit about our strategic plan, why it's important to have one, what we've accomplished, and where we're going to go in the future.
So just to make sure, as we're going through this, hearing about me, this is not this is your life, Joe. This is really about the Merakey strategic plan. So everybody, okay, well, I just want to make sure I got it down, because you'd be about the only person to be interested in this is your life, Joe.
I don't think that's true. No. Why don't you tell us a little bit about
No. I think, well, that's a very complicated story, but for those of you who would be bored to hear this story, I was actually a volunteer board member at Merakey for, I believe it was about 7 years, almost about 7 years I was here. And through that process, learned a lot about the organization and came to, at some point, to be the chair, the finance committee chair of the board. And really learned to love the organization's mission. And at that point, the former CEO was retiring, and there was a search committee formed of the board. And the search committee showed up at my office one day and said they wanted me to put my name in for consideration. So I went home and had a conversation with my wife, who was kind of looked at me stunned, saying, "I thought you were happy in the current job that you have, and that's what you were going to retire from." I said, "Yeah, I thought so too, but this seems like an interesting opportunity." And the board certainly at that point had a vision for the organization and thought that my experience and my skills would be beneficial to the execution of their vision for where the company they thought needed to go from the previous CEO to the next CEO. And so went through the process, and it was a pretty incredible process to go through, including evaluations of me and that being presented to the board for consideration as well. And I was ultimately hired for the job. So I had the great opportunity to spend 3 months in transition with Joe Rocks, the former CEO, from about a little more than 3 months, about 3.5 months actually. And that started in the middle of September of 2014. And on January 1st, 2015, I took over. That's the story.
In the spirit of This Is Your Life, I point out whenever we're together that I beat you by 13 days.
That is absolutely true.
Merakey
that is true.
So
we're both approaching, almost 10 and a half years of service to the organization, and it's been rewarding. I hope it's been rewarding for you as well.
It absolutely has. It absolutely has. And I agree with you on the mission, that was such a draw to me. I moved here because at that point.
Yeah, I had to drive 12 minutes in one direction or 12 minutes in the other to come to work. My old job was 12 minutes one way. This was 12 minutes. You actually moved here from Tennessee.
Tennessee was a little bit longer.
It's a bigger commitment and a little bit different commitment.
In fact, Jenna, my wife, forgot to change our GPS on one day and started back home to Tennessee when she hit home when she started work.
That's pretty good.
A little bit of an adjustment.
That's pretty good.
Well, in the spirit of This Is Your Life, can you tell us about maybe a lesson that you learned in one of your early jobs and one of your first jobs that still influences you as a leader today?
Wow. I mean, there's so many lessons that you learn. I think if I was to categorize the lessons, I've had the honor in my life of having worked for incredible CEOs, whether they were elected officials as mayor or governor, or CEOs of companies that I've worked for, or chairmen of boards that I've worked for. They were all incredible leaders, and I learned a little something from each of them. And if it was something I found fascinating about their leadership, I tried really hard to emulate that behavior in my own life and to try to bring those approaches to my own leadership as I evolved, and every leader evolves. I mean, you've had different experiences in your life. You're learning different things, and I was literally blessed to have been surrounded by some incredibly talented people who were my bosses at different points in time, and who were very generous to share their philosophy of management with me, and just to watch them in action and see them in their daily lives, the way they treated others, it just had a remarkable impact on me. So if I wouldn't say there was any one thing. I would say it was a series of things that I was fortunate. And one of the things I thought was really cool about each one of those experiences is that people gave me progressively more things to do than I was necessarily ready for, so that I could grow as a person. And I thought that was pretty remarkable as well.
That's really interesting, sort of pushing those boundaries and thinking of the next big thing and really testing. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was.
Well, let's jump into the strategic plan. Let's talk a little bit about that. You've been a champion of having a strategic plan since you came to Merakey 2 weeks after I did. Can you talk a little bit about that, why you feel it's important to have a strategic plan, how that grounds us?
So, I mean, to me, the strategic plan, any strategic plan, is your actual North Star, and interestingly enough, as a board member, I remember participating in the construction of strategic plans here. And I was always fascinated why, as a board member, after it was built, we never really talked about it anymore. I'm sure the company was working the plan, for lack of a better explanation, but we didn't really engage and talk about it. And I think one of the most important responsibilities of the board is to be involved in the overall strategy and objectives of the organization, broadly speaking. And so when I came here, I literally, my first days on the job, in between different things, between a lot of meetings and learning where, I could get coffee in the morning and other important essential items in your life as you're a new employee, I found the old strategic plan and took it off the shelf and started to read it. And I read very, very detailed plans in that strategic plan about where certain things were supposed to happen. I started to ask questions. Apparently they hadn't. So what was the purpose of the plan? To actually construct a plan, or to actually use it as a direction and to align the rest of the organization with it? And apparently, for whatever reason, it was loosely done that way, but not operationally implemented, at least in my perspective. And I asked one really simple question, which made no sense to me, as based on the plan that I read, there was originally in that plan an idea behind the way that we're currently structured today. And I said, why didn't we ever do that? Because we were a very regional organization. For folks who have been around for a long time, they may remember that depending on the region that you worked in, you basically had somebody who led all three divisions of our company. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't consistent with the plan that had been put together. So that
even went down beyond just the leader of the region.
Absolutely.
Down into county programming.
Absolutely. It just, and it's fascinating. So interestingly enough, I dusted that plan off, and one of the first things I did was to restructure our organization to be a more vertical organization that highlighted the talents of each division, and then tried to put appropriate leadership at the helm of each of the divisions and let them operate in a world of best practices for that division and policies and procedures that were consistent across the enterprise.
That's great. That's great. And so when you see the evolution of our strategic plans over the time you've been here, what do you see happening in this plan?
Well, if you go, each one of them, I love the fact that we've embraced strategic planning as an organization, and we have made a significant investment in the plan, in creating the plan, and then actually executing the plan and measuring ourselves against the plan. Those are really, really important things, and that is really an evolution in our company. When the very first plan that I remember doing here, I asked Leah Payson, who was then, I think, the vice president of administration, I believe is the title she had. I asked her if she would lead our strategic planning efforts, and we had to go and find outside help to kind of guide us through the process, because we were a young management team coming together, and we needed some guidance on how to ask the right questions and engage our workforce the right way, and so that there was, a real 360 view of where we needed to go. And that wasn't something that came naturally to us as an organization at that time.
Right.
And we needed some help to kind of understand that. And we got some good guidance in the very beginning of that plan. And that very first plan led us more to an internal view, like a review of what we were doing as an organization. Were we really structured the right way? Did we have the right supports in place? Was our mission about fixing the things that were going to help us become the organization that we ultimately have become, right? And in my mind, the commitment that the engagement, let's start back with the engagement of the plan itself. Through Leah's leadership, we were able for the first time to construct not just the thoughts of the executive team or the thoughts of the board, but the voice of the employees through the core team, right? That's something that emerged in that very first plan. And I was fascinated by simple words that we would use to describe things where the rest of the workforce and our colleagues would say, that's really not the right way to say that. And they pushed really hard on us to take a different view of things. And I really appreciated the candor that we got from across the organization.
I was a member of the first core team.
You were a member of the core team. So you remember, right?
I've done it as a core team member, as an executive team member, and now as the strategy.
It was very cool. It was very cool to go through all that and to get that feedback. And, some of it's a little jarring in the beginning because people have strong feelings about that, and they should. And because of that, I had a whole new appreciation for the thought process of engaging our colleagues across the organization at all kinds of levels to help us decide what we should do collectively as an organization. And the feedback was incredible. And it led us to more of I think that first plan was really an internal look at ourselves. And from there, I think we did as good a job as we could in those early years. I mean, again, everything's kind of relative. We were a struggling organization at that point in time. I don't want to minimize what we were working through. We were working through some really challenging stuff. So we needed to look internally at ourselves because the math behind what we were doing wasn't adding up. And I'm simplifying it by saying that, but it helped us get focused on really what was important for us to build the systems we needed to be successful and to have the discipline organizationally to be successful, right? Because it's like you got to go to boot camp before you can become a Marine, right? You got to learn how to do these things. You got to build that reflex in your organization across the whole organization to be successful long term. And I think that first plan really helped us be that company or become that company.
People look back at that and think about that it isn't something that somebody just had to pull off the shelf and dust it off and say why, that we lived it. And I think when we talk with Derek, especially, he talks about that really providing the guidance and discipline for us.
I agree. And it built a momentum that carried us into the next plan, which was still more tinkering with the house to get the foundation built, right? But then we started to glance at the outside and how we can continue to evolve ourselves. It allowed us to move from 8 states to 10 states to, that began the process of us starting to look outward. And by the time we really had our third strategic plan done, it was much more what's happening in the world around us? How do we prepare ourselves to deal with that world? Where do we want to be in that world on the other side? So I thought that was incredible. And, the latest plan that we're operating in is really one that I think tells a great story because we do have a great sense of, we've all been together for a long time now. Yeah. We have a sense of each other as teammates. We now can sit there and understand what those key words mean. Those, as we think about our current plan and the cornerstone of that plan, and in thrive, lead, innovate, and engage. They were different words before. They were pillars of things that we were working on. And as we've evolved, those words take on a slightly different context than they might have in those earlier plans. But they are the North Star. They guide us. They are the 4 lanes that we're working in all the time to take the organization to the next place. I just think that has been invaluable for us to align the management team, and for people who you and I understand, because we're on every Monday morning when we get together as a management team. It's to work on the things that week that we need to accomplish in order for us to be successful in the plan over a course of a year, and setting that in motion for the years that follow. I mean, all those things are so closely tied in the way that we think and the way that we act as an organization, in the prioritization of things that we do, I think is remarkable. And it's all because of where we started and the evolution of the trust we have in each other. And I mean, organizationally, the trust we have in each other, to kind of, we can work on these things. That's not to say that the world is perfect. It's not to say that lightning doesn't strike in the course. It's not to say that the ship doesn't go off course once in a while. It's to say that we haven't lost sight of where we're going, and that we can always re-steer the boat to get to the right place. And that's the beauty, I think, of our plan.
And that's what I think some people say, how do you even have a strategy in such a volatile environment? And I think the other side of this is, how do you survive such a volatile environment without a strategy?
Well, I tend to be a believer of the latter, not the former, that without that, you're a rudderless ship in the middle of a storm.
Right.
And if you always know where you're trying to get, despite all the activity around you, the things that you sometimes can control and often can't control, if you still know where you want to go, if your colleagues all believe that we're going and rowing in the same direction, even if the waves are higher at one point, even if the winds blow you in a different direction, you still can see where the finish line is, and you're still driving in that direction.
That's great. And that's at the beginning of our process, we distilled that down to our strategy statement. We want to be the leader in creating innovative solutions for individuals with complex needs. And I love that you mentioned the 4 goals are thrive, lead, innovate, and engage, that sort of drive that conversation. And so I want to talk a little bit about the last 6 months, what we've gotten done in those 6 months. So let's start there. Can you share some of your highlights? Maybe we'll talk about thrive, about resources, creating those resources through growth and efficiency. What are you, when you look back, what strikes you there?
Well, first of all, again, I would go back to the maturity of our organization now, and the fundamental understanding that we're a big organization. Everybody knows that, right? We often refer to ourselves as a big aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean, right, and going somewhere. And the reality of that is that aircraft carrier is big, and it always needs fuel to keep moving forward, right? So Thrive is part of that fuel. The biggest cost of an organization who does human service work is our colleagues. It's the cost of the employees who are in this company, and rightfully so, it should be, right? But that aircraft carrier, that this organization has a voracious appetite, and things don't get cheaper year over year to do.
I think
right?
We all feel that, right?
Right. It's the constant struggle, right? Of you need a certain amount of growth in order to pay for the cost of running the aircraft carrier for another year, right? It doesn't get cheaper each year to run it. It gets more expensive to run it. How do you deal with that? You deal with that by bringing new revenue in to the organization and using the dollars from that new revenue to pay for the additional expenses it costs year over year to run the company. So there's always that battle to grow the organization, to support the appetite that our folks deserve good healthcare. Healthcare costs go up all the time. Our folks deserve raises. We've got to make that available to them. Those costs go up every time. So growing the organization makes it possible to feed the beast that is this giant aircraft carrier that has to keep moving forward. So Thrive is often thought of in And sometimes people go, well, why do we need to grow so much? Well, largely because the expenses keep going up, so you got to grow, right? So that's kind of, that pressure is a pressure unto itself. And there's a lot of ways to deal with it, as we talk about in our plans. But a lot of it is often just the expansion of what we're doing. And I think, quite frankly, that like last year, we set a goal for ourselves to grow by $40 million. And from everything that I can see, and that is part of the broader strategic plan of growth and thrive, um, we'll beat that goal this year, which is fantastic, right? It's good for us. It's good for the organization. It's good for our employees. It's good to feed the beast that way. And we've had some significant wins in the last 6 months. I mean, in substance use um, programming through Parkside Recovery. I mean, we won a huge contract with the city of Philadelphia. That's by itself is, at least initially, $5.5 million of growth for our company alone. And more than likely, as we add other facets of what we do, which is why our programs are successful in substance use disorder in southeastern Pennsylvania, that's going to grow even more revenue for our organization. All good things, and also a recognition, because it was an open RFP procurement. We responded to an RFP. People evaluated us for our ability to deliver those services and awarded us that contract. That's a great thing. And similar things are happening on the adult behavioral health side in the systems of care that are being built out down in Louisiana, where we're winning outpatient programs down there. Folks want us to employ our ideas around a system of care, including primary care for individuals who are in our ACT programs in Louisiana. All these things are coming together. Little old contracts that are being awarded to us that are making it possible for that concept of system of care and adult behavioral health to be built out. The Children and Families Division is doing many of the same things in small contracts that they're winning, because they're already being recognized as leaders in family first services and preventative care services, in a transition that we're trying to make as an organization to the future model of children's services in this world. And then lastly, I'd say that the performance-based contracting initiatives that happen in the state of Pennsylvania, and I will tell you, in the beginning, when I first heard about things, I was a little skeptical about that. But I have to say that the work our organization has done to prepare us to be a premier provider of services in that space has been, I think, life-changing for our organization. It is who we're going to be in the future. And I believe the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is going to recognize us as a unique provider of those services. And as a result of that, I have to tell you, I applaud ODP in Pennsylvania for the Office of that oversees our residential and ID programs in Pennsylvania. That office, I thought, was, as I said, aggressive in its position early on, and as I've come to watch how this thing has played out, I have a lot of respect for the vision that they have. Pennsylvania had always been a leader in this space, years ago, and I think they're taking that mantle back again. This was really, really thoughtful process to put all the providers through in Pennsylvania, and disability programs run by the state with that kind of vision, I think, are going to be rewarding to the individuals we serve in a significant way. That what outcomes are going to be rewarded, and I think that is the absolute right way to approach that side of our business, and it has forced us to become a more significant and more meaningful provider as a result.
And I love this about our plan. I love this about our discussion. We start with Thrive, and we talk about building those resources and how we're investing them in innovation and in technology structures, and especially in our workforce. And we get to a discussion of the innovation that's happening in the division. which is another one of our goals, is driving that innovation as an organization.
So it's fascinating because if you go back to that original plan and then you think about where we are right now, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm talking about Thrive in the from the perspective of generating more opportunity for the organization. But at the same time, the linkages that exist between lead and innovate and even engage, right? I mean, what we need to do in all facets of this, each header, Thrive or Lead, or they're interwoven at this point in time within this organization. They all impact one another. And I didn't mean to simply say that we're doing that simply to generate more revenue. It's not. But there is a reward for us for doing it the right way. And part of that is, as I know you're going to get, I'm sure one of the questions is, well, how are we a leader in the industry? How are we innovating? Those changes that we're making, those innovative changes that the state is mandating, is an enormous amount of hard work, an incredible amount of investment of our managers' working time, and the technology we need to marry those things together. Without them, you can't be a preferred provider. It just doesn't work. So again, we're talking about one area, but the reality is they work also closely together, and the way that we've been able to build teams that understand all the nuances of that and work together to make it happen is, I think, remarkable and a testament to what a plan actually can deliver for an organization.
And that's what I think about the innovation. You talk about performance-based contracting and being a leader in that space in Pennsylvania, but that differentiates us everywhere we provide services. And that's exciting to see. And I think that leads sort of into the discussion of lead and how we use demonstrable outcomes, how we use data to drive that story we're telling.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, you and I were on a call just yesterday talking about these very things. And as a leadership team, I got to tell you that, I philosophically believe this, I think you do as well, that the future of our industry, whether the industry is mature enough to understand that aspect of it now or not, the future of our industry is going to be based on our ability to differentiate ourselves from others. Now, I hate to use the term because it gets thrown around way too loosely, and the value-based awards, things like that. I think people use that term a lot, but I think we've been able to do some things a little differently. And I'm going to just step back into time a little bit and talk about how we've been able to use, I'll use Philadelphia County simply because it's near, but our ability to convince our payer that there was a different way to provide substance use disorder services, where they allowed us to model something and then to try it ourselves, and then to use what they learned from us to basically change the entire payment system for everybody in the county to the benefit of the entire of the people being served and the providers of those services, which Merakey is a provider, but not the only provider, is the kind of leadership stuff that I think is critical for the future. If we're going to be a leader, we have to be a thought leader. We have to have the data analytics that support our ability to walk into a room and say, here's what we've experienced in other places. This is why, if you're thinking about an RFP, here's another idea you might want to consider for the successful outcomes that you're trying to get to, and to use us in that way. And I just believe that that's the future, and I think that's the reward structure that's coming across all the divisions in our company. And lead is that. It's when we walk in that we use the data that we have available to us, we analyze it, we present it at conferences to the rest of the world in written documents, and then people recognize us as not just a good or really good provider or a great provider, but also a thought leader in this space. And that's really, I think, collectively where the organization decided it wants to go. And I applaud it, and I think we should go there.
And I think it's exciting, your comment and conversation about looking externally. And that change in the system was not only about the people we serve, the provider, but it was about influencing the whole system and us starting to look at how we can impact healthcare and community health. And I think that's just a really exciting piece of that lead goal.
I agree. And I think much like physical healthcare is going through its changes too, and its further consolidation and things like that. Our industry at some point, with 13,000 providers across the United States, are going to have to go through some degree of similar consolidation. And I'm glad we're where we are, and I'm glad that we're working toward being a thought leader and innovator, because and otherwise healthy provider of those services. You put all those things together, and all of a sudden we're in a really good position. So as the industry continues to evolve, we're in a good position to be a major player in that space.
And I think that innovation in both, we have to think about it both in service delivery and in payment structure innovation, so that we start recognizing that value and making sure that we share in that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, this is a little bit of yesterday's conversation we were having as an executive team, and everything in payments, services, it's all evolution, right? You're constantly in change, in flux, and you're trying to figure out. And different people are going to try different ways. Different payers are going to try different ways. They're going to realize, especially if there are major changes, say, to Medicaid at the federal level and how it's being made available to the states, it's going to force the industry to think about things in different ways. It's going to force harder conversations about who's actually getting the outcomes that are necessary to be successful, right? I mean, it's just inevitable. It's not necessarily bad. It's just inevitable. And as understanding that or thinking that through, you want to be on the side of, hey, I have another idea. It might be beneficial to you, payer, in the way you're approaching it, and not just having them dump stuff on us, but actually engaging us and sharing information back and forth that might put us in a position to be even more successful in the future.
And leading the conversation.
Correct.
I'm going to throw lead in there.
No, and again, I mean, I think that really speaks to who we want. We want to be at the table with you having that conversation. We want to be your partner in that conversation. Payer, county agency, state agency, we want to be at the table having those conversations as a respected partner. And that's what lead to me is all about. It's understanding that there's value to a conversation with our colleagues when they walk in the room and can present data that supports why it is that they might ask you for a different way of being paid. I just feel that that's the future. I don't know if it's tomorrow or 3 weeks from tomorrow or 5 years from tomorrow, but I got to believe it's coming, because the system as it's currently set up is changing too quickly for it. Everybody wants outcomes. The payers want outcomes, and I mean the MCOs want outcomes, right? In the old days, the savings to the state government or county government might have been in hiring an MCO and being able to control their costs. And one of the ways that's the reason MCO said, we can manage this better than you can manage it. Okay, great. Well, they've been managing it for a long period of time now. But the states are getting more sophisticated too. They don't want you just managing the money. They want you to start demonstrating that you're having success with the dollars that they're investing, right? This is where I think the big change is coming for our industry. And you toy with that in the front end with value-based payments. You reward people because there are certain milestones that you hit, certain metrics that you're able to attain. But the next step in that thing is I believe is the thought leadership and sitting at the table and saying, we need to show that we're moving people through that system to a lower level of care, to more independence in their lives. And our ability as an organization to be able to demonstrate for the individuals who are entrusted to our care that we can do that for them is going to be invaluable to us in the long haul.
And I think that links to, we've talked a little bit about it, that innovation work systems of care, preventive services in children, performance-based contracting, anything else you want to talk about that stands out to you in the work that's being done there, we've seen sort of move along in the last 6 months, and that's as a continuation of that long-term work in those divisions.
There's no one thing other than I believe that with the data that we've been able to gather and the refocusing of our organization on the individual that we're caring for, I think is the ultimate game changer. If we put the individual, our consumer, at the front of this thing, if this is really a client-based built system that we're focusing on, and I think our company is trying desperately to be that organization, that is going to drive incredible change. And our ability then to report on that person's successes and further independence is what this whole thing was all about for us. And I really think strategically, we made a change ourselves that refocused on client patient centered care. Like that's where we want to end up being. And that again emerged through us thinking through this stuff strategically as colleagues up and down this organization. We started to focus that way. No wrong door. You can come in here, however you come in here, you're our client. We want to make sure you're successful. You have an interaction with the hospital. We want to be engaged with you. We want to understand. We want to be part of that discharge planning process. We want to understand what medications you received, what tests were done when you were in there so that we can ensure you're not back in there in another 10 days. And I think we're seeing success in the metrics that we're measuring with regard to rehospitalization and the successes that we're having in the community because we're so close to individuals in that community to keep them out of reentry into the hospital, rehospitalization, or being able to successfully come out the other side and make sure that the services that you need are being provided, and often it's us quarterbacking to make sure that happens.
And that's, I think, such the key word, the culture change. We talk about what's happening in the divisions, but I think that whole person care is that thread that moves through the organization that says, we're going to work towards success for you as an individual, a quality of life success, and it's broader than the service delivery. It's that whole person support.
Yeah, it's a really great point. And if you think about it, there's so many. I mean, from the day I got here as a board member, it was what drew me back was the anecdotal evidence of our success, right? It's that story that somebody would tell. And in the past week, it was one of our case management employees who calls on a home, walks in, smells gas, gets the whole family out of the house. And a minute later, that house literally blows up, right? And saves everybody's life. That's a great story. And I've heard 1,000 of them, as you have, and those of us who are out there in the field working every day, they deal with all the time. But beyond that is the success of individuals and families that we can evidence through the actual data of our work. It's the technology that we're deploying to make it possible for a clinician to be able to spend more time focusing on the needs of a person and less on clinical note-taking, and the successes that they can demonstrate and some of the feedbacks on how best then to take that individual, instead of saying, I'm spending a lot of time doing administrative work, I now can really focus on their care and start to really, really move them through the process to a lower level of care. That's the kind of innovation. We talk about innovation, the IT department actually now, Merakey, who had for years been at the forefront of all the work that we do in our electronic health record and getting it deployed across the entire organization, right? She's now focused on a very specific task, and that is to understand the administrative task that a DSP has to do, a direct support professional in our organization has to do on a daily basis. And how can I make that job just a little bit easier for them so that they can focus their energies on the care of the individuals that they're working with? And I'm telling you, like, that wasn't even possible in our company a couple of years ago. But today it is. And that's all she works on. Looking at these things. How can I do things? How can I automate functions that, I mean, I walk into a house and I'll see people taking notes on a piece of paper and writing in these big binders all the time. And it's apparent to me that it's an enormous amount of work that ultimately then has to be translated into an electronic health record. A lot of keystrokes. Yeah. After all that writing, you just kind of go, there's got to be a different way. Well, Minu's looking at all that stuff because she has the time now to dedicate to living a day in the life of and saying, there's a better way. We can do this in a different way. And that all percolated from visits that I had to individual homes and conversations I had with managers of homes and how things could be a little bit different. And again, that's innovation. And we're going to get to that place, hopefully before anybody else ever gets there. And that, again, will differentiate us from other providers in the space, right? I mean, those are the kinds of things that are happening. And it's not just, it's happening across every division of our company. And it's just remarkable to see. But if you don't focus on it, if it's not a pillar of what you believe you have to be, you'll never put an amount of energy into it that's necessary in order to be successful.
And I think that some of the value of our size and the scope of what we do and the growth that we're looking at, we have the pilot where we've employed some of that. We've already saved in a small pilot 1,300 hours that has been turned back into client-facing time.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And to think about that in an organization of our size with all the administrative tasks that we do, being able to just slowly chip away at those kinds of things are going to make our employees feel more engaged in the things that they were trained to do,
in the mission.
Right? In the mission, right? It's like you're trained to do it. You understand there's an administrative component to it. But in all fairness, you'd rather be doing your work than doing that. If we can make that work a little easier for you, imagine the difference it's going to make in the clinical time you're able to spend with your individual and the responses you're going to get from them as a result of being able to spend that time with them. It's just it's exciting to me.
And it is exciting to hear. It's exciting to hear about just the savings, the savings of time and the redirection of that to quality, and us thinking about the quality of life of our employees, which brings us to our fourth goal, which is engage, and thinking about how we build that engaged workforce for the future, because we're not going to get any of the other things done without them. So what are your thoughts and priorities as we look to build this workforce for the future?
Well, I mean, I don't think I think it's been the goal of this organization. We've whether we now call it to engage, but before it was the employment experience. And to me, everything that is, our colleagues are everything. I mean, we're not making automobiles here. We can't use robotics to do everything. I mean, we're in the human service business, right? I mean, it requires human interaction in order to have success, and part of that is trying to create an environment where our employees who've chosen this as their profession. This is the work they want to do. I often say to you, I often say to Leah Payson, I'm not trying to compete with Ford Motor Company. That's not. I want people to work at Merakey if they've chosen human services as a career. That's the organization we need to be, and that is going to be something collectively as an organization we have to work towards forever. Which is why it's a North Star. The star may be 4,000 light years away, but that doesn't mean we don't keep moving in that direction. And if we consider, much like we were just talking about on the innovation side, our employee at the core of this and what's important to them, whether it's being able to be a successful organization so we can continue to give increases to our workforce and pay them a living wage so that they can live the lives that they want to live, or give them health care that's affordable in a world where it is really expensive to get good health care, or to deliver things like care.com and little things that we're able to do. We got to keep striving to do that. And then we got to change, we got to use innovation to make their workday different for them, more meaningful for them. I mean, all this stuff comes together in my mind with, having a successful, engaged workforce, right? And, our colleagues are telling us what they want. We want people to be here. I love the stories of individuals who are here for 30, 40, 50 years of their career, 50 years of their career.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. But success, if you're measuring things, is going to be, how do I get more people to be here for 30, 40, or 50 years? And that really has to be part of the goal that we set for ourselves as a management team, to hear what people need, to try our best. And we're going to try things and we're going to fail. We're going to try ideas that people are going to go, yeah, that didn't really work for us. Okay, then we're going to try something else. But if we're always focused and trying to do the right thing, and that's, our success will dictate our ability to do more of that. But if we continue to be successful, we're going to continue to make those kinds of investments. And as a result of that, we're going to create the organization where, I hope one day, this is the place, if I choose this as my profession, and this is the career I want to have, that's the company I want to work for. I want to work for Merakey.
And I think it's important to stress here the employee engagement surveys.
Oh, absolutely.
The voice and the feedback that we get from our employees drives these actions.
That's what drives them, right? I mean, we're out there asking every year, and it's so important for employees to respond. And I think sometimes, we pepper them with so much information. We're going to pepper them with this video at the end of it, right? And people have to sit through and listen to it. But if there's one takeaway I would ask all of our colleagues, is that when that email does show up, whether that, it comes as an email or it comes as a text message, please take the time to answer that survey, because that survey drives so much of what we try to do. And again, we're not perfect. We're not going to get there in 1 year, but our intentions are to create an environment where professionally this is where you want to be. And if you're helping us by sharing that information with us, we're going to take that information, we're going to put it to use. We're going to find tools that we can bring to you that will make your employment experience different here. And we won't always get it right, but we'll keep trying if you keep giving us the feedback. I really, if there's one takeaway I would have for today, it would be to ask our colleagues to just, when that one email comes, to take the time and express themselves in it.
And it means, like the Merakey Miles of Excellence you talk about, our 30, 40, 50, that came out of that engagement survey. The Sunshine Award, where we have our colleagues recognize each other, that's part of that. The performance development, core competencies, all driving from employment.
Like you know this stuff well, so spend a second telling everybody a little bit about what those programs are, how they, like you said, how they evolved and with it from the feedback we received.
Sure, and that really is the driver of what it is we want to do. So the engagement, those Merakey milestones, Merakey Miles of Excellence, I tend to call it Merakey milestones, recognize those milestones so that we reach out to our employees who have made that dedication to the company. I think that is so key and it's important. I love the fact that we're using data. There are now dashboards that tell us this information and pop up so that we can keep managers involved. And then Sunshine Awards allow us to recognize our colleagues. And I know that you've called some of those winners.
I've called all of them, actually.
To interact.
I've had an opportunity to speak to each one of them individually.
So that is exciting in that recognition, but also the work that our HR team and our organizational leaders, because it's not just HR's job to engage, like they can help with the tools and provide that. And I think they've done an amazing job in building these core competencies out. That we as an organization picked the strategy and said, here's where we want the organization to go. How can we help our employees succeed through these core competencies? And by really providing them with tools through prior learning or the enterprise development group, like they're driving the success of the individuals here and the organization, and seeing those things come together is what's really exciting.
It's interesting. I mean, I think, individual development is something we have not done. Performance development, feedback to our employees. We haven't done enough of that in the organization, and we've got that feedback from our colleagues as well. Hey, I want to know how I'm doing in my job. I need to have that interaction. That is something I know that HR is working really, really hard on. We're piloting some things across the administrative side of the organization and in children and families that I hope one day we'll be able to roll out. But giving our colleagues that kind of feedback, letting them know that we're thinking about them and creating career ladders for them, and that there are opportunities, are all part of that feedback that we receive from them, and then the execution of that through our strategic initiatives.
And putting some real clarity around what it means. Communication collaboration is important at this organization. Innovation tech savvy, it's important at this organ. They link together for individual success and strategic plan success.
Could not agree more.
I think that's exciting. We've talked a little bit about sort of the big picture, what we've gotten done. What do you want us to think about as we move to the next 6 months, the next year of our strategic plan?
Yeah, I think more than anything else, for all of us, we're going to have to spend a little bit of time trying to understand what's coming for the world if there are significant financial changes in our industry, and what the ramifications of that are going to be on the plan that we have. Because we have a pretty ambitious plan as an organization. Once we have a better understanding of that, and I'm open to feedback from everybody, and I think, quite frankly, you'll be out getting the core team reassembled to kind of talk about, does any of this stuff change where we are? Do we need to modify our plan in some way? And then I think it's really critical that once we decide if it does or it doesn't, how we communicate where we're going as a result of those findings for the next year and the next 3 years after. I mean, I think that's really, really important. If I ask for folks, it's a little bit of patience as we're probably doing a little more modification than they generally would at this 1 year into a 3-year plan. Only because, obviously, whenever you have changes in Washington, that's going to lead to maybe changes in philosophy about certain programs and how things should be funded, which may or may not impact the work that we do. But we have to be conscious of that and kind of work together and figure out, will it have impact? And if it does, okay, how are we going to change the plan? And then how are we going to share what we've learned with everybody else in the organization so that they understand, hey, we've reprioritized some things this way instead of that way going forward.
That's back to our really taking into account that external environment, understanding how that impacts and how we still get to our North Star.
That's
despite the storms.
Yeah, the star is still the star, right? We're not losing sight of that, but there are other things that are maybe changing it's not a straight line situation all the time, right? We can point at something, but different things take you off course at different times, and you need to say, okay, what do I need to ensure that we remain on course? I mean, to me, the course is, whether it's you and me or others at the executive level of the company, we've been entrusted with 55 years of history in this company, right? That's big, and it's a huge responsibility, right? We understand that our role, because I talk to people who have literally generations of family members who have worked in this company, mothers who have daughters who have worked here, fathers and husbands and wives who have worked. There's just generations of that in this company. And the one thing is, they've known we've been around for 55 years. It's our obligation collectively to ensure that we're going to be around for 55 more, right?
It is.
Because we're just trustees of a job. We're the trustees of these positions at this moment in the history of our company. Other people will take our place in the future. We need to steer the ship through whatever storms we face to make sure that it's still here to serve the real reason we exist, the individuals we serve, right?
That's right. That's right. And are there lessons learned that you think we should be thinking about, that we should be looking back from the last 6 months, that as we look to the next 6 months, take into account as an enterprise?
Well, I would go a little more deeply than just to say over the last 6 months. What I would say that I think the difference in our organization and a lot of organizations in our industry is there's a remarkable calmness and discipline that exists in this organization that I think is hard to find elsewhere, right? And even through difficult times, it's really important that the things that have made us successful, we stay focused on those things. We understand the reason behind why we do them. We take into consideration the changes that are coming that would maybe affect some of that. But we use the same discipline that we've used to get us to where we were, from a troubled organization financially when I first arrived here to the organization that we are today. That was because we all believed in each other and we all had discipline to stay focused on the plan. The plan is our guiding principle, right? If we collectively decide this is what's going to get us through, then let's believe that. Let's stay focused on it. Let's remain aligned with it, and let's keep driving that decision that we make collectively.
And that collective decision and action, I think, is key to a message that we want to share with everybody, that in addition to the engagement survey, we'll come out and talk about this. I'd love to come out and talk about the strategy. This gets me excited talking about it. People can reach out to strategy@merakey.org. I will give that a plug for people to reach directly into the strategic process, talk through your leadership structures with your core team members. But everybody has a role. And I think that's important. The core competency is the actualization of that.
Brandon, everybody has a role. It just so you have the role of chief strategy officer. My role is the CEO. Neither role is more or less important than any clinician who's working for us right now, any direct support professional who's working. Like, everybody has a role, and within that plan, it's critical that we all understand what our role is and our obligation is in that plan.
That's, I think, what we want everybody to leave this conversation with is this is not something happening just at the board level or at the exec team level, that this is a plan for all of us to build that success as an organization.
Couldn't agree more.
So, any final thoughts you want to share with, I've done the plug for strategy@merakey.org. I've done the really interested in feedback about communications, about strategy, how we can do that better. Any final thoughts you want to share before we close out?
Yeah, it's not a thought, it's a request. I'd love for some feedback on this conversation from everybody. I don't care how they get it to me. They can get it. You can go into the directory and pick my name out and send me an email, or you share it with you.
Same for me.
I mean, we're all. I mean, I would love to know, because if people find this useful or valuable in some way, it will help us kind of decide how to go forward and doing more of it or less of it, or something, a little bit different. I mean, I'd love to know how people feel about this. It would be helpful for me to understand the value of it.
And that's, as I mentioned, hopefully this is the first in a series. So if there are questions you want me to answer, you want Joe to answer, you want anybody else in the organization to answer, please send those to us. I'm excited because these conversations are exciting to me. It's exciting to think about the organization's future. So thank you, Joe, for being the premier guest of Merakey in Motion. And I look forward to a lot more of these conversations.
I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Joe.